Good evening and welcome. I am Amarachi Ubani. Tonight, International Monetary Fund says Nigeria's economy on the right track, attributes progress to improvements in agriculture and crude oil output. President Buhari writes Senate requests $5.5 billion to fund the 2017 budget. Federal government says implementation of its economic recovery and growth plan has entered second phase as the Nigeria Economic Summit opens in Abuja. And as Liberians go to the polls to choose their next president, Kenyan opposition leader Raila Odinga opts out of the rerun presidential election scheduled for October 26th.
On Business News tonight, International Monetary Fund highlights impact of low commodity prices on most of the world's emerging economies.
For sports news, Nasarawa Amazons oust reigning champions Rivers Angels to reach the final of the 2017 Nigeria Women Football League Super 4.
And from Abuja, a 25-year-old Nigerian student killed in South Africa during a police raid near Johannesburg, the third in about 1 month.
We begin outside Nigeria in Washington, D.C., where the latest World Economic Outlook report was released by the International Monetary Fund. Some good news for Nigeria. The report indicates that the global economy is improving, with Nigeria's economy listed as one of those in Africa with positive prospects. Channel's business editor Bosun Omofaye reports on how Africa fits into the new outlook for 2017 and 2018.
The global economy is expected to grow additional 0.1% to 3.7% in 2018, according to the latest World Economic Report released today by the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank here in Washington. But this recovery is still soft.
For 2017, most of our upgrade owes to brighter prospects for the advanced economies, whereas for 2018's positive revision, emerging market and developing economies play a relatively bigger role. Notably, we expect sub-Saharan Africa, where growth in per capita incomes has on average stalled for the past 2 years, to improve overall in 2018.
For Africa's largest economies, Nigeria and South Africa, including Angola, depending on oil and agriculture, the forecast is that the growth in 2017 and 2018 would be far stronger than before, despite the risks from the global oil market.
What we see for the headline numbers is a pickup in growth this year, a better outcome, which is largely driven by the larger economies, Nigeria, South Africa, and Angola, where one of factors that had been weighing on growth, particularly weighing on growth, are dissipating and allowing for a somewhat better outcome, but not necessarily a very strong one. In particular, in the case of Nigeria, stronger oil production after the problems in the Niger Delta last year are dissipating. Better agricultural production are playing a role. Likewise, in South Africa, a rebound in agricultural production as drought conditions in the broader region have eased, and stronger mining output are helping.
Now, down the rest of the week, there will be various regional discussions and meetings and briefings here in Washington, D.C. that will focus on specific issues concerning Africa, Middle East, Latin America, and even Europe. All this week from Washington, D.C., Bosun Omofaye for Channels Television News.
And here's Bosun now in Washington, D.C. for more updates on the IMF World Bank Summit. Bosun, what can you tell us about the discussions at the summit today?
Well, the report, the World Economic Outlook that you spoke about, has one message. Oil prices are improving. Nigeria's production is climbing very rapidly. Agriculture output is also encouraging. However, how do you use these resources to quickly beef up of our reserves? How do you build social infrastructure? How do you bridge inequality between the rich and the poor very quickly? What fiscal, structural reform agenda do you need to put in place very quickly so that you can include women and youth in job creation and wealth creation moving forward? These are the key issues here that were discussed and this report highlighted. Yes, recovery is coming through for Nigeria, for South Africa, and for Angola, but these are very soft. In case there is a problem with oil prices or global oil demand, how do we use the gains of the moment to make good for the future? Those are the key questions here.
And is this any closer to the economic recovery and growth plan by the Nigerian government?
Well, the structural reforms, what the world wants to see are there. Nigeria needs to get more tax revenues and deploy these revenues more expeditiously and to the right people at the bottom of the pyramid in Nigeria, with social infrastructure. Oil also there, prices are below above 50, almost $60 a barrel this year. We've seen major gains. How do we put all of this together very quickly to build an economy that is inclusive for everyone without leaving anyone behind? Remembering very well what happened in 2008 and 2015 and 2016, and avoid a repeat in which the previous oil revenue and commodity boom were wasted and nothing to show for it at the end of the day in building a stronger economy that will bring everybody in and have an infrastructure that can deliver growth moving forward. Amarachi.
Bosun, just before you go, has the Nigerian delegation at the meeting reacted to the World Economic reports? Have they said anything about it?
Well, we're expecting Nigeria's finance minister to be here tonight and to hold a major discussion tomorrow, as well as the governor of the central bank later on Thursday. They will be holding a number of meetings and discussions around what this latest economic report reveals. But don't forget, there is no change to Nigeria's GDP growth forecast for 2017. It's still 0.8%. Next year is going to be 1.9%. And by the year 2022, that will be 1.7%. So Ethiopia is still stronger than Nigeria in terms of forecast. Between now and 2022, South Africa is also still stronger than Nigeria in terms of what this report revealed today. So there's still a lot of work for the fiscal authorities and the monetary authorities in Nigeria to do, and they'll be doing a lot of listening more and take home after this conference ends on Sunday.
Well, thanks a lot, Bosun, for bringing us up to speed. We look forward to you filling us in on the meetings in the days ahead.
Thank you.
Back home, President Buhari is asking the National Assembly to approve an external loan of $5.5 billion to finance the 2017 budget. In a letter read by the Senate President, Dr. Bukola Saraki, the President explained that the sum of $3 billion would be sourced through the Eurobond, while $2.5 billion is expected to come from other sources in the international capital market. The fund will be channeled towards funding capital projects in the 2017 budget and refinancing maturing domestic debts.
Request for approval of external loans for 1. Implementation of the external borrowing approved in the 2017 Appropriation Act.
Finally, President Buhari's letter requesting approval for external borrowing gets to the National Assembly. In the letter, President Buhari is asking the National Assembly to approve a total of $5.5 billion through Eurobonds or a combination of Eurobonds and diaspora bonds to finance the 2017 budget and capital expenditure in the budget. A part of a loan is also intended to refinance maturing domestic debt obligations.
The Senate may wish to note that the proceeds from the proposed issuance of Eurobonds and diaspora bond in the ICM will be used to finance the deficit in the 2017 Appropriation Act and provide funding for capital projects in the budget. The projects include Mambila Hydropower Project, construction of a second runway at Nnamdi Azikiwe International Airport, counterpart funding for rail projects.
The letter is coming a week after the Ministers of Finance and Budget appealed to the National Assembly to urgently accelerate approval for the loan to fund the 2017 budget.
At some point, there was a misinformation that this was before us. And Nigerians will not understand. They will think that this was before us and we didn't work on it and we didn't treat it. So, and it is just coming, Mr. President.
With a deficit of 2.356 trillion naira in the 2017 budget, the executive is anticipating a speedy approval of the borrowing request by the National Assembly. But with less than 3 months to the end of 2017, there are concerns that the plan to return the country to a one-year budget cycle will not be achieved, as the 2017 budget has not achieved 50% implementation. Neither has the executive forwarded the 2018 budget to the National Assembly. Linda Akibe, Channels Television News.
As global commendations continue to trail the federal government's economic recovery and growth plan, the Minister of Budgets and National Planning, Udoma, believes the implementation of the plan is entering a new phase. The minister explains that the federal government is following the Malaysian model of establishing a series of economic implementation micro-labs, which will bring all the actors together to localize investments across Nigeria. He was one of the keynote speakers at the 23rd Nigerian Economic Summit in Abuja.
As Nigeria fights to build a more inclusive economy, captains of industry have joined with the chairman of the National Economic Council in the person of the vice president to brainstorm on ways to make more effective the implementation of the federal government's economic recovery and growth plan.
Exchange rates, and we also started to see inflation tick up quite a bit.
At this summit, it is hard to find an empty seat. This is investor interest generated by a policy document being hailed in global capitals as one which pulled Nigeria out of an economic recession. But with reports that 2019 calculations are informing organized legislative obstruction on key budgetary and project funding instruments, the economic recovery and growth plan's implementation is being closely scrutinized.
You've expressed concerns about whether it will be properly implemented, given Nigeria's past record with previous plans. And I appreciate these concerns. But I can assure you that this government is committed to the faithful implementation of the plan.
From the Vice President's vantage point, ease of doing business, power sector growth, port and customs reform, and education reforms are keys to realizing the objectives of the ERGP.
Overhauling the entire educational system is a long-term one, and of course we have a plan. In the short term, we're looking at vocational education, and we're ramping up vocational education in various institutions. The Ministry of Education has been mandated to look at how relevant vocational education, especially with private sector involvement.
Because Tony made a reference that
large-scale investors insist that while government's action is yielding fruit, investments in Nigeria's abundant human capital must be incentivized for businesses.
Everybody focuses on the size of the investment and the number of jobs that we're going to start with. Nobody ever says, well, what is your training budget? How much are you going to spend on developing people? How will you help develop your supply chain? Because all of those factors will determine whether the plant that we start that has 150 people grows to 300 or shrinks to 0.
We cannot reverse what my viewpoint is about.
At this summit was an emerging consensus that even as government continues to diversify the national economy, the effectiveness of state and local administrators in enabling localized investment is critical to the achievement of the policy's objectives. Ajuri Ngilale, Channels Television News.
While the controversy rocking the NNPC continues to dominate public discussions, interestingly, the men in the eye of the storm seem to have moved on from all the allegations and counter-allegations. It's now a case of no permanent enemies in business, as the Minister of State for Petroleum, Ibe Kachuku, and the NNPC Group Managing Director, Mekanti Baru, were seen embracing each other when they met at the 23rd National Economic Summit in Abuja today. Meanwhile, the national body of the Nigerian Union of Petroleum and Natural Gas Workers, NUPENG, is worried about the bad international image the controversy between Kachuku and Baru may have caused Nigeria. They want the president to thoroughly investigate the issues raised in the leaked memo to justify his administration's fight against corruption. The union is insistent that due process must be followed in the discharge of contractual agreements.